Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, the official translation of One Piece chapter 1000 is out. You guys know how we do the video. Talk about the official translation compared to the fan translation. Note any difference. Talk about literally anything at all. And then round out the video with comments from you guys. So yeah, there's only one thing about the translation that I want to talk about. And it's something that I didn't talk enough about in my first reaction. We have a scene between Ace and Yamato. Ace says, "Damn it, my tongue slipped. I spoke without thinking. Forget any of this happened, okay? Wait, more importantly, don't you dare laugh. Sabo and I won't forgive you if you do. That was my little brother's ultimate dream." The official translation translated in a slightly different way, which I think emphasizes the nuance of what Ace is saying. Ace says, "That's at the end of my little brother's dream." So Ace accidentally said something that he wasn't supposed to say. That the thing which might make other people laugh is at the end of his little brother's dream. This seems really straightforward to me, and honestly not a big deal, although I got a lot of comments asking about this and questioning this. I assume that this refers to something that we already know. Luffy had a conversation with Rayleigh, in which he said that being the Pirate King to him means being the most free. He's not trying to conquer anything. This brought a tear to Rayleigh's eyes, and then we saw through Shanks that Shanks had a conversation with Rayleigh in which he said that Luffy had said the same thing that Roger had said. And then after the scene, Yamato says that the Pirate King said the very same thing. Now, I'm not entirely certain why Oda was vague in this instance when this should be something that we already know, but again, it feels very straightforward that Luffy often says, "I'm gonna be the king of the pirates," and that seems to be his dream, and Ace even refers to it, I think, as his dream in this scene. But what would make people laugh is the result of this. Being the Pirate King to Luffy means being the most free. To a lot of people, I think that it's natural to think, okay, you went through all of this trouble, and this is your great reward? As the king of the pirates, you could have whatever you wanted. And what Luffy wants is freedom. But truth be told, if you ask me, even once Luffy acquires his title, I don't think that he's going to have the freedom that he thinks that he's going to find. Which then might set up and necessitate the next step. If Luffy believes that the Pirate King is the most free, the freest, and yet still isn't free enough, then the world itself has to change. But yeah, let's get into the comments. Quote, "The great man," end quote, is clearly Gold D. Roger. If not, then the conversation could have been between any characters. But because Ace is in the conversation, it becomes ironic. Ace hates his father for the bad father he was, but as a person he shows admiration for him without knowing that the great man is the very father he hates. Joy Boy is long dead. But essentially I made this grand statement, right, that this last chapter essentially confirmed, even more so than maybe it was before, that Luffy was Joy Boy. But I didn't explain the steps to get there. So let's do it now. So this is the most important thing. The flashback that we saw in the last chapter between Ace and Yamato started this way. They said that in the future, over 20 years later, the new world here would be overrun by young, powerful, new pirates. And so that's what's happening now. I believed that Ace was first and foremost among them. But when Ace died, I remembered something. And then we jump into the flashback. So the whole premise of this flashback is Yamato explaining to Momonosuke why it makes sense to him that Luffy is the first and foremost among the new generation of pirates, not Ace. The second thing that you need to keep in mind is that all information in One Piece is additive. Even if Oda doesn't directly connect the dots, some things you can just do by reading the story. And so we know that Yamato has Odin's journal, and inside of Odin's journal there is a ton of secrets. It's basically his whole life story. There's things about the D in there. There's things about the various prophecies that we now know about, like 20 years from the time that he wrote it in the journal, there was powerful pirates going to be in the New World. So essentially the jump in logic here, and it's not really a jump, is that Odin wrote about Joy Boy. He wrote about the D's. I have no doubt that he also wrote about Joy Boy. As Odin returned to Wano, he mused that they needed to open Wano's borders for the day that Joy Boy returned. So Odin was anticipating his return, along with these various prophecies about powerful new generation of pirates showing up 20 years in the future and defeating Kaido. This event is imminent. Odin also knows because he was on Roger's ship. Roger basically told us that the reason why he couldn't become or change the world is because he arrived too soon. But he also knew that somebody in a short amount of time was going to surpass him. Roger also has this interesting line after discovering the true history in Laugh Tale, basically saying how he regretted not being able to live in Joy Boy's time. A lot of people take this to mean the past. I think that you could also take this to mean the future. It's not specified. Odin essentially said that Joy Boy was going to return, so Roger lamenting about not living during Joy Boy's time could mean either the past or the future. Maybe a future in which the world is more free, something Roger wants the same as Luffy. And we also got a sense of the kind of person that Joy Boy was or should be from the poneglyph in Fishman Island. Essentially, there's a poneglyph there which is an apology from Joy Boy to the mermaid princess Poseidon. Again, this is another thing that people assume happened in the past, but could actually be a prophecy or a recording of a dialogue that has not yet occurred. But either way, it paints Joy Boy, or who we should think Joy Boy to be, as a protector or as a leader. Someone who holds a lot of responsibility for the outcome of this great battle, past or future. But I don't want to confuse you. The point is that there's important pirates that are going to rise up 20 years from the time that Odin was writing his journal, and they're waiting on the appearance of Joy Boy. Joy Boy is this character that's influential in great events to come, and also potentially in the past. And Roger has essentially prophesied that somebody will surpass him. And the whole premise of this flashback is Yamato explaining why Luffy is going to be the one that is going to be first and foremost, is going to lead this new generation of powerful pirates. Luffy is Joy Boy. Or at least I think this is what we should be thinking after reading this scene. And so the point of contention, right, is that Yamato refers to a great pirate who had the same dream or view as Luffy. And of course, this is true of Roger, and so because of that, it is ironic for Ace to like Roger despite spending his entire life hating his father. But I also think that Oda was purposefully misleading with this entire scene. When Yamato is explained to Ace, he never mentioned Roger. I think that Oda was misleading on purpose, because I think that these words can refer to both Roger and Joy Boy, or Joy Boy from the past, however this works. Which is why Oda teased the great pirate who is already dead, rather than straight up tell Ace that, Yamato was talking about Roger. The only reason that you would be vague in this instance is if you were talking about somebody that Ace would not have known about. Everybody knew about the Pirate King. And I think that it's also important to keep in mind that if Odin mentioned Joy Boy in his journal, Yamato read this journal, knows about Joy Boy, it would make sense for Yamato to be excited for the person that's going to fulfill this role or be Joy Boy, or again, however this works. So when Yamato is thinking about, a pirate who's going to lead the next generation of pirates, which are going to cause a great event in the world, then he's thinking about this from the standpoint of Joy Boy and the prophecies, not Roger. Yeah, it's amazing that Luffy is like Roger, who was the previous king of the pirates, but more importantly, is Luffy is like the guy who's supposed to return and change the world. And then it becomes more of like a mysterious fun fact that all of these people are the same, that Roger was the same as Joy Boy, and so is Luffy. The fact that they all had the same mindset then becomes a really curious coincidence, which obviously probably isn't a coincidence. But I guess the last thing that I have to say about this is that this entire chapter was centered around Luffy. Like, every single thing adds up to Luffy being set up to be the greatest of all time. That's why the chapter was named after him. And that's what made chapter 1000 so special. The only scene in the entire thing that isn't directly related to Luffy seems to be this weird flashback between Ace and Yamato, where, as this comment says, maybe the takeaway here is it's ironic that Ace would have liked Roger, but spent his whole life hating him. So I really like my interpretation here of connecting Luffy to all of this, essentially as the true meaning of this scene was that Luffy is Joy Boy, because it then relates to the entire rest of the chapter and no longer makes this the only thing that doesn't fit. Either way, I think that you have to agree with me that conceptually for this chapter to have implied that Luffy was Joy Boy, the person who's going to change the world, makes a lot of sense in context with, the theme of the chapter. Yeah, Luffy acting just like Roger carries its own weight, although that was previously revealed in the story, but this sort of brings it to that next level, that chapter 1000 level. But as always, I'm receptive to your thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Let's get into the next comment. A lot of people, including myself, doubted that Luffy could beat the Yonkos. This chapter is the ultimate statement from Oda to us, the fans. He's directly reassuring us that Luffy can and will surpass everybody. We're basically Kaido, Big Mom, and everyone who doubted Luffy and laughed at him. He will surpass our expectations, he will find the One Piece, and he will be the person with the most freedom. I think that you have to count me in on this. I said it in my first reaction, I'll say it again now. It seems like the whole premise of this chapter is that the new generation, Luffy at its forefront, is going to defeat Kaido. Now, as I speculated, it doesn't necessarily have to be Luffy. Like, for instance, if Prophecy is alluding to the worst generation, that could include Blackbeard, and so Blackbeard could play a more pivotal role than Luffy, or play just as important of a role and sort of take away a little bit from Luffy's accomplishment here. But at the very least, I think that Luffy now, he's got to fight on par with Yonko. I think that if you don't believe that after this chapter, you kind of miss the point. That doesn't mean that it's going to be pretty, that Luffy's going to make it look easy, but it's going to happen. The composition of this chapter is the composition Oda uses before the Strats do something epic and exceed whatever expectations you have for them, beforehand. I'm just telling you guys, those are the facts, and you can choose to listen to them or not. This is Luffy punching the pacifista after arriving to the New World. It's like, yeah, I'm here now, and I'm at a much greater level than I was before. It's the same as, the crew going after the Frankie family after they messed up Usopp. It's the same as the crew all together and Luffy asking Usopp to shoot down the world government's flag. Yeah, we're not scared of the world government, and we're going to go in and mess them up. It wouldn't make too much sense if we don't get a very strong feeling in the chapters to come that Luffy is actually in position, this is a real fight. Again, this doesn't have to mean that everything is easy and there are not hiccups along the way or bad things that happen, but it's got to feel like a real fight, that the Strats actually have a chance to win, and probably will win. Next comment, I don't want the answers to be in the journal. Let's face it, it's Luffy. Just like when the Strats met Rayleigh and Usopp asked about the One Piece, Luffy didn't want to hear nothing about it. I feel like Momonosuke will try to tell Luffy about his father's journal and read some of it, and Luffy will close the book within a single sentence that is more or less a tease for us readers. This is 100% what is likely going to happen. Or maybe the journal gets destroyed. But this not only applies to the contents of the journal itself, but also what has explicitly already been revealed to us, such as the prophecy in this chapter. The great pirates leading the new era are gonna, defeat Kaido. If that is just straight up what happens, and it happens exactly like you would imagine it, then I probably won't like it. So I more or less said this just to, and I expect Oda to deliver, and I don't want to imply otherwise, but I just said this as a talking point of, I really hope that this line that we've got in this chapter, when we go back and reread it, a year from now or whatever it ends up being, that we see it in a slightly different light. That it was at least a little bit misleading. Next comment, WTF. Kaido has been tested all his life. The dude has been defeated countless times. So this comment is related to what I said about Luffy essentially having surpassed both Big Mom and Kaido in terms of his haki being bloomed in situations of great struggle, and that really the Kaido and Big Mom in particular are not on the same level, at least in terms of observation haki, as Luffy is, and so that's going to give Luffy an opportunity to fight them relatively equally. This is the way that I interpret it, this is the way that I look at it, right? Big Mom and Kaido are naturally based on their devil fruits and or their natural disposition are incredibly difficult to damage naturally. Not by haki, this isn't insane armament haki, I don't think. It's something intuitive and natural. So if they are so hard to damage that basically nobody can do it, why would they need to develop observation haki? I think the key ingredient that Oda has cultivated when developing haki is, you're limited by your ambition. And this really suits Luffy because he puts himself in impossible situations often because his dreams are so lofty and unattainable. Both in terms of the long-term goal of being the Pirate King, yet being limited physically compared to monsters such as Kaido and Big Mom, but also in terms of the every arc protecting your friends against whoever might be threatening them. And I think that this will ultimately separate Luffy from essentially everybody else in terms of his hockey prowess. I don't mean to imply that the Yonko, Big Mom, and Kaido have never struggled, but comparatively to Luffy, they haven't. And this will be related to their mindset, their ambition, and what they're naturally capable of doing, without really having to try. So we can use Big Mom as an example. I think Big Mom's ambition, like truly in her core, relates to her wanting to tell other people what to do. That's what drives her forward. That's ultimately the impetus which makes her stronger. But you'll also notice that this isn't always 100% true, because there's many occasions in which Big Mom avoids fights, like she's avoided a confrontation with Kaido for many years. We're not led to believe that she ever fought Roger. So it appears as though, while she does want to tell people what to do, there's also this, I have to protect what it is that I already have, at the expense of going to war with somebody who I think is, or would be, a challenge. So you can kind of see how her ambition fell a little short. The person who wants to tell everybody what's right and what to do is in fact not doing that in order to build strength to eventually do it. In the process, avoiding conflicts, which would lead to circumstances in which it's more likely for your hockey to bloom and grow. And I think that it's pretty easy to understand that if you compare this to Luffy's ambition of wanting to do whatever he wants to do, whenever he wants to do it, and protect everybody that he cares about along the way, there is a difference in ambition here. And so far in the story, I don't think that Luffy has really ever settled, except for the 2-year time skip. Another way of looking at this is imagine Big Mom and Kaido fought, right? So it ends in a stalemate because neither can damage the other. But you put Luffy in a fight versus either one of them, and Luffy is susceptible to dying. And if this happens, then potentially all of his friends, everything that he cares about, also goes with him. That puts so much more pressure on Luffy to grow in a much faster amount of time. Big Mom, on the other hand, seems to be okay when her family members die. I don't think that she wants that, but it doesn't affect her in the same way that it would affect Luffy. So you're in this stalemate with Yonko, Kaido, and the same pressure, the same inspiration to grow is not there. And then eventually Big Mom gives up and then decides to join Kaido in an alliance to plan some other way of defeating him other than in a straight up fight. So she doesn't develop the means to actually be able to damage Kaido like probably Luffy will. And I think that the same thing is going to be true of Kaido, but we talked about Big Mom here because I feel like I know a little bit more about Big Mom than I know about Kaido. And then you get like a character like Blackbeard, whose hockey isn't going to grow because of his power with devil fruits. So the strength of his devil fruits is going to limit his ambition and circumstances which would bloom his hockey, comparative to Luffy. And Blackbeard also has the personality to be patient and bide his time. So the same urgency hasn't been there. Next comment, when Joy Boy said, I hope Luffy Bellamy's kid, I stopped listening to the rest of the things that he had to say. Like, come on, it would be outrageous. I understand why people would think this, and I understand that maybe this isn't the most likely thing to happen. But I also think that you should be careful of your assumptions. As far as I understand it right now, the dichotomy between Kid and Luffy is very similar to the conversation that we just had between Luffy and Big Mom and Kaido and Blackbeard. Kid has, for the most part, tried to be cautious in the New World, kind of taking a step below Luffy in terms of putting himself in danger. He was the first one to go seek an alliance. He attacked Big Mom, but he attacked the ship away from the island itself, ran away and thought that he had a victory. Luffy actually went to the island itself, confronted Big Mom herself, and then escaped the island. It's like taking the same thing that Kid did, but bringing it to the next level. I think that Oda beautifully conveyed this when Kid was really first introduced in Sabaody, where we pan to Kid and he's reflecting on Luffy and Zoro and just thinks that these guys are insane. Basically implying that they're doing things that I probably wouldn't do. And there's a little sense of jealousy in that as well, like their presence is actually kind of pushing Kid to do things that he didn't consider like the right thing to do initially, just because they're showing him up and being successful doing it. I think that this has been a pretty consistent portrayal throughout the story for Kid. I mean, even Luffy going and attacking Marineford, trying to get Ace back, we pan to Kid who's sort of observing these events, and you get that sense of respect and a little hint of jealousy. Like after Luffy punched the Celestial Dragon, Kid's eyes are all wide open like, oh, he actually went there. And then he's like, oh, damn, I can't just let this happen and then run away, you know, I'm part of this now, or if I don't do that, then I'll think less of myself. And so I think early on during the time skip, this had a profound effect on Kid, and maybe the reason why Kid decided to initially seek out Shanks and where he lost his arm. Again, another difference between Kid and Luffy is Luffy cares about all the people, and he cares about his crew to a level I feel like is greater than Kid. And so that pushes Luffy further than Kid. Luffy attacked the world government because of Robin, for a person that he cared about. Luffy punched the Celestial Dragon for Hachi, a person that he cared about. Luffy attacked Marineford along with the Whitebeard Pirates for Ace, a person that he cared about. Kid isn't motivated in the same way, and it limits him. So with all of this in mind, I imagine that when inevitably we get conflict between Kid and Luffy, this is going to be the theme of that fight. Kid's jealousy, and ultimately what has separated Luffy and Kid in the story, why Luffy's going to become the king of the pirates and not Kid. And I could imagine Oda being very emphatic in that fight. Because of their motivations, because of their ambitions, and their journeys up until this point, Luffy has separated himself from Kid by a substantial margin. So Luffy Bellamy's Kid. Regardless, I see potential setup for this. I see a pathway for this, and I think that it makes some sense. Like the whole deal with Luffy and the Bellamy fight is that Bellamy didn't dream big like Luffy, and he was so concerned about power and bounties, and Oda made a point here of just completely and utterly destroying Bellamy and his arrogance. Bellamy needed that wake-up call in order to be converted to the way of the Straw Hats. Luffy's not really all that concerned about bounty or about fame. He's just enjoying the journey, doing what he wants along the way. Kid is also the kind of character that is sort of obsessed with fame and accomplishments. And I think that Kid might get the same treatment. But again, I'm not saying that this is the most likely or the most intuitive or realistic thing. So just keep your mind open. We'll obviously see. I think for sure Oda is very creative and it's not always as you would think that it would be. Always, oh, Luffy fights next villain and it's just 100% copy and paste, fight them and their crew fight together. It's not always like that. Next comment, dude, in the latest episode when they announced their alliance, Big Mom is eating tons of Oshiruko while Kaido is drinking tons of sake. I don't know about your food rage theory. So I got a ton of comments about this, and it appears as though I need to clarify. I already clarified on Twitter, but we'll do it again here. So yes, Big Mom has eaten Oshiruko after she formed an alliance with Kaido, but the idea of her having a food rage again in Wano is all about the current party. Right, go back to Whole Cake Island. Big Mom ate tons of sweets before she had the cake, but she started obsessing over wanting the cake and, the whole extravagance of the feast and the party. I think the way that Big Mom's rages work essentially is that she starts to be consumed by the idea of eating something. She obsesses over it, and that's what starts to build the rage. We can kind of also see this when she's really young and she had the delicious Simla, and then the days started passing and she thinks more and more about it until she finally cracks. And so I think in her old age, this time span, she lasted 6 days or something like that for the Simla, the time span to when she cracks is not as long because she's always gotten what she wants immediately, basically when she wants it. And so they're set up from earlier in Wano, from the beginning of the Fire Festival, that Big Mom was excited for the feast, and that she was excited for the Oshiruko, and that, Queen hadn't made enough and wanted the chefs to make more, and then they made more, and then the Beast Pirates wasted some because they didn't actually like it because it was too sweet. And through all of this, Big Mom has never actually eaten here today during the party. despite having the expectation that this would be a party, and that she would get what she wanted. Kinda just like the cake, the time for feasting has arrived and she hasn't had to have any. And so depending on how long it takes this fight to occur, Big Mom might start craving it, and then it might cause a rage. Even though she had Oshiruko, 3 or 4 days ago. Next comment, regarding fate, the most interesting aspect to me is Roger's comment when he got to Laughdale that he was too early. That seems to imply knowledge of a timeline and his position in it, made evident by whatever they found there. That is to say that if there is fate, destiny, or some such, it may be something specifically relevant to the story, and not just the philosophical existence of fate. Oh yeah, this is definitely true, right? Because we've got Joy Boy is supposed to return, there's this moment when the One Piece is found and the world is going to turn upside down, and ultimately there's got to be a prophecy or something like that that exists that says that somebody is going to come and change the world. And there at least has to be some inkling of a time frame, a timeline for this to occur. So very, very relevant to the story. My guess here is that the Poneglyphs told Roger that there would be a time in which pirates from across the world set out on an adventure to the sea, like the Grand Line was flooded with pirates, and that hadn't yet occurred in the world. Yes, there was pirates, but it was a more natural process. And so Roger interpreted this and sort of took it upon himself to create this era. And in so doing, it became very obvious to anybody who read the Poneglyphs with him, including Odin, that the time that the Poneglyphs spoke of would be within this next generation. And then from this, I kind of imagine that there's little things going on that maybe Odin had picked up and wrote in his journal, which further sort of confirmed his suspicions that the time that the world would change would be soon. Like, for instance, learning that the one that was supposed to be Poseidon would be born soon, and it would be just another reason why Roger came too early. There may also have been other things, such as information alluding to a great monster, a great pirate, which would take over Wano and then be defeated by this new generation. And so then Odin returns to Wano and finds the monster Kaido there, but is also at the same time realizes that probably this is the monster that the prophecies refer to. So even if he loses, there's something on the horizon to look forward to. And maybe that this pirate or this monster Kaido's defeat would relate to reopening Wano's borders. But anyway, this is kind of how I see it, and this is kind of how I want to see it. Like, I don't really want the Poneglyphs or prophecies to spell out, the exact year or whatever that something would occur, but be vague enough for even the Roger pirates to have put some things together. Like, 24 years from the time that pirates would flood into the Grand Line would be when this great war starts. But you don't know exactly when this happens, so then Roger sort of takes it upon himself, and the Poneglyphs alluding to a great monster taking over Wano, and then sort of Odin putting that together himself. So he doesn't know, but he suspects very strongly. Next comment, Oda got to you, Joy Boy. You yourself even said that he will do his best to convince you of something and then flip it. These guys are not defeating Kaido right now, in my opinion. This comment is obviously from somebody who has watched me for a very long time, and dude, I appreciate you. Like, really. I have talked about this a lot, but at the same time, it requires a certain amount of certainty and conviction to hold true in the face of so much evidence against whatever you might have thought beforehand. And Oda does a good job about that. I made a video a really long time ago, sort of looking back at the Lucci reveal and the CP9 reveal in Water 7, and how there was evidence in which you could have potentially theorized that members of Galley Law were CP9 or whatever force was influencing Robin. That was a theory that could be made. Of course, nobody actually believed it at the time, because the moment before the reveal, Oda tricked us into believing that they were dead, and you had to jump through crazy hoops in order to believe that they were alive, to the point of you would look insane. So you would have to be very certain to speak openly, even if you had, suspicions. And at the end of the day, I guess I'm as guilty as anybody. Like, for real, no joke whatsoever, I DM'd Morge asking him why, what was the basis for... He so strongly believes that the raid will end in failure, and I see it as a possibility. Even now, right, I see it as a possibility, but why are you so certain? And he really didn't, I guess I didn't act him directly. I was looking for the videos in which he talked about it, and he said that they're spread out all over the place. And what I did watch, it didn't convince me enough. But I'm still curious, what exactly has been said, or what have you concluded, or what conclusions have you drawn from this to make you this confident? Or are you just kind of playing it off like this is your theory and you're gonna go down with the ship, but you're just as uncertain as everybody else? Because if the reasons are there, it escapes me. And that's good. I think that keeps storytelling fun. There's some times where, with Big Mom, I feel like I know some things logically that make some events inevitable. So in a way, it's kind of cheating. It's I know that for sure Big Mom is going to discover the fate of Mother Carmel, and likely the fact that she killed her. And or this bit of knowledge is going to be incredibly relevant at some point in time. I also know that Oda has devoted a lot of energy into setting up the relationship between Big Mom and her children, which can only be taken certain ways. I also think that we can confidently conclude that Big Mom and her children aren't completely aware of what exactly her sickness is, and so this knowledge has to be revealed to them at some point in time for closure's sake. Because Big Mom's rages are a huge component of her deteriorating relationship with her own family, because in these states, she has actually killed her children, and Montdor has said as much. Which makes them think a certain way about Big Mom, which doesn't necessarily have to be true. All of this also paints Big Mom as a character who needs to be saved. And so the Strides do roundabout save a lot of the villains in the interactions. They beat them to a pulp. They convince them of their Stride ideology by way of defeat. And then these characters often return as kind of different people. But in the context of what's going on here, Big Mom needs this to be saved in a much more direct way. It's not a situation where the Strides can simply defeat her and then, okay, well, Big Mom is better now. And so she disappears from the story and then comes back and, oh, look, now I'm your ally, or now, I'm not, we'll have some positive interaction. Kind of like what occurred with Bellamy. And this creates a really interesting situation. It's kind of unprecedented, or at least, at first thought, because, it's well, Big Mom needs to know these things that are bad about herself, and she needs to do so while still interacting with the Strides, which gives her opportunity to change while still in the story and act in the story in a completely different way. And then, of course, there's also the simple logic of when Big Mom was first introduced, she wasn't named, but she was implied to be an ally. And then the first time she actually appears in the story, she's nothing like that initial implication from Lola. And so Oda goes extremely hard to convince us that she's nothing like, what we should have thought her first to be. It begs the question of why exactly did you go through the trouble of setting her up in this way in the first place, when there was no reward for it? When the first thing that you do when you really introduce Big Mom beyond just the idea of her existence is contradict everything that we were supposed to assume beforehand, which is how you go about setting up a plot twist in the first place. Where through the events in the story, Big Mom slowly becomes, or eventually becomes, what Lola implied, an ally of the Straw Hats. So yeah, the point is it's these reasons and several others why I am incredibly confident about speculations regarding Big Mom. It really doesn't matter what happens in the story for the most part. And of course, I don't expect to be exactly right, but we're talking more about the generalities and, the broad strokes of her story. And of course, similar things here I believe are true with other theories people don't like regarding Luffy and Zoro. I'm lacking that when it comes to defeat here in Wano against Kaido, and the raid ending in failure. Why exactly does this raid have to end in failure? Why? Please, for the love of God, do not give me power scaling reasons, because I do not put a lot of stock into those. In the case of the Straw being defeated by Kaido, I am very much less certain. That being said, as with all things, I see from different points of view. I'm not saying that it can't happen. absolutely not. I can't envision a world in which the Strats do fight on even footing with the Yonko, as I sort of take this chapter to imply, and they do a lot of impressive things worthy of the moment, but ultimately fall a little short, with huge ramifications for this. And then ultimately, someone like Blackbeard comes in and delivers the final blow and is sort of the thing that puts them over the edge for Kaido to lose here and now. But the Strats themselves, despite Kaido's defeat, aren't left completely fulfilled by the events, and so it might feel like failure. But yeah, as with always, it remains true, Oda is a master of this, is when it comes to plot twists, so things that Oda is not trying to make you expect directly. The moment before something happens, it is often the most difficult to believe that it will, because that's just good storytelling. This is a consistent in One Piece. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if Morge has the final laugh and ends up right. In fact, I kinda hope that it's true. Next comment, given that the battlefield is literally floating above where anybody can reach it now, I'm astonished anyone even entertains the idea of a totally new faction showing up for the battle. I never believed that idea to begin with, but I feel like the possibility of it happening at this point in the story is just astronomically low and astronomically stupid. I think that your problem here is that your imagination is limited. And my first assumption usually is that Oda is going to surpass my expectations and surprise me. In a one-on-one fight, I always bet on Oda. So when something doesn't actually seem likely, in some respects it makes it more likely. I'm not going to go to my grave speculating it if it's, not the most intuitive thing, but I'm going to keep my mind open. The island is floating right now. No faction can possibly join this battle. And then Fujitora shows up and uses his ability to bring the island crashing back to the ground. Or Kaido actually drops the island. Or Dragon has another mythological dragon fruit and flies up and joins it. Or he has similar abilities to Kaido and actually brings the island back down too. I'm just saying, where there is a will, there is a way. And Oda's will is to surprise us in the vast majority of the time in very realistic, understandable, and exciting ways. So if it is his desire to bring another faction into this battle, like a lot of us suspect is the case, then he will find a way to do so. And there is a way. Next comment, discounting the Chelkhovs Gun idea is akin to saying a red herring and a story is insignificant. I actually think I've talked about this one time, but it's a really interesting conversation. There is a way to do a Chelkhovs Gun right, and there is a way to do it wrong. But for those of you who aren't following, Chelkhovs Gun essentially is an idea that is placed within the story that needs some kind of resolution, or else its placement in the story is insignificant. It's essentially the idea that everything in the story has to be relevant. Everything has to have a purpose. If something is without a purpose, then it should be removed. I could be misreading this comment, but essentially I take what he's saying here to mean that essentially if you think that, Chekhov's gun has to be fulfilled, then, red herrings are insignificant in a story, red herring being distraction. But the point here is that a red herring can be done wrong, or in a way that to audience is very much unsatisfying and is usually characteristic of very weak writing. So as a theoretical example of this, you have scenes between Luffy and Zoro in which Zoro questions Luffy's leadership and decisions and seems to be wanting to make decisions for him, even threatening to kick him, and then this happens and nothing ever comes of it. Nothing at all. Luffy defeats Big Mom and Kaido, and this thing happening is never brought up ever again by anybody. For sure, this would be a red herring which would mislead you and distract you from other things that you should be thinking of. But it's also very unsatisfying to readers. And it's also a characteristic of very sloppy literature. So to turn this from a bad red herring into a good one, you simply have to come back to it and has to have a place, a purpose in the story, and that by itself fulfills the Chekhov's gun. You don't have to do it in a particular way. There's no limitations as long as it has value in the story beyond misleading readers from other things. So Zoro comes back to having done this after Luffy has defeated Big Mom and Kaido, and apologizes to Luffy and has a powerful moment emotionally for ever having doubted him. I should have never told you to abandon Sanji and not disrespected your leadership. Or on the other hand, Luffy loses to Big Mom and or Kaido. Zoro comes back to him and says, I told you so. This setting up a moment in which Zoro can teach Luffy to be a better leader or follow his direction or something. But the point is that for this to be good writing, something has to happen. What that something is, you can obviously interpret it as you see. But yeah, guys, this one was a long one. Hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, I'm curious as to what you guys think. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Like the video if you liked the video, dislike the video if you disliked the video, subscribe if you want to be notified for my future content. And as always, guys, have a wonderful day.